Have you ever held a letter so tightly that the ink seemed to bleed into your very soul, carrying with it the echo of a voice long silenced by the cruel arithmetic of war? In the quiet hush of a summer evening in 1944, Eleanor Hartman stood by her kitchen window in the small town of Millville, Ohio, clutching a telegram that trembled not just in her hands, but in the deepest chambers of her heart, where love and loss intertwined like roots beneath the earth. The paper was thin, almost fragile, like the thread of hope it threatened to sever with its impersonal precision, bearing the faint, metallic scent of government ink and the distant hum of wartime machinery that had stamped out so many dreams. "Missing in action," it read, in stark black type that blurred through the quiet sting of unshed tears. Each character a dagger to the fragile peace she had clung to for months. Outside, the cicadas hummed their endless, indifferent song, a chorus oblivious to the personal cataclysm unfolding within those four walls. While the warm July air pressed against the screen door, heavy with the sweetness of blooming honeysuckle and the faint, earthy promise of rain. Inside, time itself seemed to pause, heavy with the unspoken question that clawed at her chest. How do you breathe? How do you go on when the man who held your world together, whose laughter filled the empty spaces of your days, whose touch was the anchor in every storm, has vanished into the unforgiving skies over a land you'll never see? Eleanor waited, and in that waiting, she discovered the quiet agony of love that refuses to fade, a flame that burns steadily even as the world moves on around it. For 12 long years, she held on, each day a silent testament to the heart's enduring whisper, a refusal to let go of the man who had been her sky, her ground, her everything. Eleanor was born in the gentle thaw of spring 1918, on a morning when the first robins returned to the outskirts of Millville, their songs piercing the crisp air like notes of renewal after a long, harsh winter. The clapboard house where she entered the world sat humbly by the Scioto River, which meandered lazily through fields of golden corn and sturdy soybeans, its waters murmuring ancient secrets to the drooping willows that lined its banks, their leaves whispering in the breeze like forgotten lullabies. Her father, Thomas Riley, was a railroad mechanic whose hands were perpetually etched with the black grease of engines and the unyielding calluses from wrenching iron. Yet when he lifted her small form onto his knee each evening, those hands became instruments of wonder. By the flickering, golden glow of a kerosene lamp that cast dancing shadows on the walls, he taught her to read, his rough finger tracing the curves of letters in dog-eared books borrowed from the traveling library wagon, tales of explorers charting unknown seas and quiet heroes tending hearths in far-off villages. In those moments, with the scent of pipe tobacco curling lazily from his clay bowl, mingling with the faint mustiness of aged paper, he planted in her young heart a seed of wonder, intertwined with the subtle ache of unspoken longing for a life beyond the river's bend, a yearning for stories that might one day become her own. Her mother, Clara, was a seamstress of extraordinary grace, her fingers dancing like delicate sparrows over bolts of fabric in the dim light of their sewing room, turning the humble flour sacks of the Great Depression's lean years into dresses that fluttered like butterflies in the summer wind. During those barren times, when dust storms choked the horizon and bank foreclosures echoed like thunder through the valley, Clara's quiet hums filled the air, a soft melody drawn from old hymns, carrying notes of endurance that wrapped around Eleanor like a warm shawl. From her mother, she learned the profound art of mending, Not just the frayed hems of skirts or the torn seams of overalls, but the invisible rips in the spirit, stitching together hope with threads of quiet resolve. Each needle prick a reminder that what is broken can be made whole again, if only one persists with gentle hands. It was in the crisp amber-hued autumn of 1937, amid the whirl of falling leaves that painted the ground in shades of fire, that Eleanor first encountered William. Will, as the folks in Millville came to call him with easy familiarity. The harvest dance in the creaky old town hall was alive with the twang of fiddles and the stomp of boots on scarred wooden floors. The air thick with the heady scents of fresh baled hay, spiced apple cider simmering in crocks, and the faint, comforting smoke from the bonfire crackling outside. He was 20 then, tall and lean as a young sapling, with hair the warm, sun-kissed hue of ripening wheat fields at dusk, and eyes that crinkled at the corners like well-worn laugh lines, revealing a depth of kindness that made her chest tighten with an unfamiliar fluttering warmth, as if her heart had suddenly remembered how to dream. Working long hours at the local feed mill, his days were a rhythm of heaving 100-pound sacks of grain onto rumbling trucks, his arms corded with the quiet strength of honest labor, dusted with the fine chaff that clung to his skin like golden pollen. Yet when he took her hand for that first dance, his touch was feather-light, tentative almost, like the brush of a summer breeze through meadow grass, sending a shiver up her spine that had nothing to do with the October chills seeping through the walls. As they swayed to the fiddler's mournful, lilting tune, notes that tugged at the soul like threads unraveling a sweater, he leaned close, his breath warm against her ear, carrying the faint, wholesome scent of oats and soap. "You move like you've got wings hidden under that dress," he murmured, his voice low and earnest, laced with a boyish shyness that belied his easy confidence. She felt her cheeks flush, a bloom of heat in the cool hall, and laughed softly, the sound mingling with the rustle of wind through the open windows and the distant hoot of an owl in the woods beyond. Later, as they slipped away for a walk along the riverbank under a canopy of stars pricked like diamonds into black velvet, the water's soft ripple echoing their footsteps on the pebbled shore, he shared his dreams. "One day, Ellie," he'd say, using the nickname that rolled off his tongue like honey, his gaze lifting to the hawks wheeling lazily overhead. "I'll soar like those birds up there, free from the pull of the ground, touching the clouds with my own hands." She listened, her arm linked through his, feeling the steady beat of his pulse against her side, and in his eyes she saw a flicker of that same yearning that stirred in her own hidden depths, a life woven together from shared silences and bold aspirations, unbreakable as the river that carved its path through stone. Their courtship unfolded like the slow unfolding of a rose through 2 Ohio winters, marked by stolen moments under snow-laden branches that bowed like weary sentinels, where the cold air bit at their cheeks and turned their breaths into visible, intertwining clouds of affection, fragile as spun glass. The kisses they shared began tentatively, lips brushing like whispers in the frost-kissed air, then deepened with the quiet certainty of souls recognizing their match. The taste of peppermint from the hard candies he kept in his coat pocket, lingering on her tongue like a promise. They picnicked by the river in stolen spring afternoons, spreading checkered blankets on the mossy banks, sharing sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, ham thin-sliced from the smokehouse, cheese sharp and crumbly, while the sun dappled through new leaves, casting patterns of light that danced across his face like fleeting joys. Will spoke of building a home with a wide porch for watching sunsets, of children with her dark curls and his adventurous spirit, Eleanor dreamed aloud of a garden bursting with roses, their thorns a reminder that beauty often comes laced with quiet pain. They married in the golden light of June 1940 in the simple, sun-warmed sanctuary of the Millville Methodist Church, where shafts of sunlight filtered through stained glass windows depicting shepherds and lambs, casting kaleidoscopic colors on the wooden pews. Wildflowers from the meadow, daisies with petals soft as velvet, Queen Anne's lace nodding like lace doilies adorned the altar and aisles, their fragrance a delicate veil of sweetness that masked the faint must of polished oak. Will stood tall in his best suit, starched to crisp perfection by Eleanor's own hands, the fabric whispering against his skin as he shifted nervously, his eyes locking on hers with a devotion that made her knees weaken. Her dress, sewn by Clara's loving, meticulous stitches, flowed like a cascade of ivory silk salvaged from an old curtain, brushing the worn floorboards with a hush as she walked the aisle, her heart pounding a rhythm of joy so profound it bordered on a sweet, anticipatory ache, tears pricking her eyes not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming fullness of the moment. The plain gold band he slipped onto her finger was warmed by his touch, simple yet eternal, engraved inside with their initials intertwined like vines, W.E., forever linked. That wedding night, in their tiny rented cottage on Elm Street, with its walls papered in faded florals, and a featherbed that sagged comfortably in the middle, they lay entwined beneath quilts stitched by Clara's circle of church ladies, the distant wail of train whistles piercing the velvet darkness, like calls to distant adventures. They whispered dreams into the hush, children's laughter echoing through halls, a porch swing creaking lazily in the breeze, hands growing old together while watching fireflies wink in the yard. Yet even in that sacred intimacy, the world intruded subtly. Newsreels at the Millville Picture House, just a mile down the dusty road, crackled with urgent dispatches from Europe. The swift fall of France in the sweltering heat of June 1940. German panzers rumbling like thunder across the Maginot Line. The relentless blitz that began in September, when the skies over London filled with the droning geese of the Luftwaffe. Bombs whistling down like vengeful stars, turning the ancient city into a inferno of shattered stone and defiant spirit. Will's hands, once content with the steady cadence of millwork, the rhythmic thud of sacks hitting truck beds, began to clench with a restless purpose at the dinner table, his gaze drifting upward through the lace curtains to the endless Ohio sky, as if pulled by invisible strings toward a horizon fraught with both glory and shadow. When the thunderclap of Pearl Harbor shattered the fragile illusion of isolation on that fateful Sunday, December 7, 1941, the attack on the Hawaiian naval base, a sunlit harbor suddenly engulfed in smoke and fire, the USS Arizona's magazine exploding in a cataclysm that claimed over 1,100 souls. Will enlisted the very next week, his decision forged in the forge of duty and the quiet fire of conviction. "I have to go, Ellie," he murmured that tense evening at the scarred oak kitchen table, his voice steady as the tick of the mantel clock, but laced with a tremor only she could detect, a subtle fracture in his resolve that mirrored the knot twisting in her own stomach. Steam rose languidly from their chipped enamel coffee mugs, carrying the bitter, grounding aroma that clashed with the saccharine dread in the air, while the radio droned in the corner, its valves humming with voices urgent and metallic, recounting the devastation, carrier planes swooping like hawks, torpedoes slicing the calm Pacific waters, the acrid stench of burning oil that must have choked the dawn. She nodded, her throat constricting like a noose drawn tight, unable to voice the storm raging within, fear for his safety warring with pride in his courage, her fingertip tracing the familiar, blue-veined map on the back of his hand, memorizing every ridge and valley as if it were the only compass that could guide him back to her. He trained as a pilot in the vast, unforgiving plains of Texas, where the relentless sun baked the red earth into cracked mosaics and winds whipped up dust devils that gritted between teeth and stung the eyes like unshed tears of frustration. The airfields there were hives of activity, young men in olive drab, their faces taut with determination, scrambling into cockpits of AT-6 Texans, the radial engines coughing to life with a throaty roar that vibrated through bones. Will's letters arrived like irregular heartbeats, envelopes postmarked from bases like Randolph or Moore, smudged with the sweat of hurried hands and the oily residue of hangar grease, his handwriting bold and looping across the blue-lined paper, each stroke a lifeline stretched across the continent. Darlin' Ellie, these planes are magnificent beasts, sleek and hungry, with wings that bite the air like eagles claiming the thermals. Up here, in the endless blue, I feel truly alive, the wind singing through the struts. But oh, how it pales against the memory of your soft curve of a smile, the way your hair catches the light and smells like fresh laundry drying on the line in that summer sun we both love. Hold the fort for me. I'll be home before the first snow flies. By the chill grip of early 1943, he was shipped across the Atlantic to England, assigned to the 357th Fighter Group of the mighty 8th Air Force. Their base a sprawling patchwork of runways and Nissen huts at Leiston Airfield in the flat, wind-swept county of Suffolk, where the damp Atlantic gales carried the briny tang of the North Sea and the perpetual mist that clung to everything like a shroud of uncertainty. The Yoxford Boys, as the locals dubbed them after the nearby village with its thatched cottages and ancient pub, lived in a world of routine peril. Briefings in Quonset huts, lit by bare bulbs, maps pinned with red yarn tracing bomber routes over the Reich, the air thick with the scent of damp wool and unwashed urgency. Back in Millville, Eleanor anchored her days in the familiar textures of home, taking a job at the Riverside Canning Factory on the edge of town, where the Monongahela River's lazy flow powered the turbines, and her shifts blurred into a symphony of mechanical clamor. The relentless clang of tin lids sealing jars, the sharp, vinegary steam rising from vats of boiling tomatoes that reddened her cheeks and stung her eyes. A constant reminder of the blood spilled so far away. In those shadowed wartime years, Millville pulsed with a subdued, almost reverent rhythm, its tree-lined streets echoing emptier without the easy banter of its young men, now scattered like autumn leaves across oceans and battlefields, leaving behind a hush broken only by the occasional rumble of a rationed truck, or the sharp cry of a screen door slamming shut. Eleanor rose before the sun crested the eastern hills, slipping from the featherbed where Will's side remained cool and untouched, the sheets still faintly scented with his bay rum aftershave, a ghost that both comforted and cut. The dew-kissed grass in the yard was cool and damp beneath her bare feet as she knelt in her victory garden, a modest plot of turned earth behind the cottage, her fingers sinking deep into the rich, loamy soil that yielded reluctant treasures, knobby carrots with dirt-clotted greens, slender green beans snapping fresh from vines that twisted like veins. She preserved them methodically in glass mason jars, the lids twisting with a metallic screech before sealing with a satisfying pop that echoed in the dawn stillness. A small, defiant victory against the ration books that governed their every meal, their pages stamped with the stern authority of the Office of Price Administration. the factory whistle pierced the morning hush at precisely 7 a.m. A shrill clarion call that summoned her to the long, echoing shifts in the cavernous building, where rows of women, wives, sisters, mothers, like her, stood shoulder to shoulder at conveyor belts slick with condensation. Their hands, once gentle from kneading dough or cradling babies, now bearing the rough badges of wartime labor, calluses from twisting lids tight against the pressure cooker's hiss, nails chipped from scraping labels. The air inside was a humid fog, thick with the acidic bite of fermenting vinegar and the earthy tang of overripe tomatoes tumbling in wire baskets. Conversations drifting in low murmurs over the relentless churn of machinery. Whispers of letters from the European theater. Tales of the latest war bond drive, where Mayor Hargrove auctioned a prized heifer for scrap metal. Voices threaded with a shared undercurrent of fear, like a dark river running swift and unseen beneath the surface of camaraderie. "Heard from your Will lately?" Mabel Jenkins would ask during the mid-morning break, passing a thermos of weak coffee that steamed faintly, its bitterness a poor substitute for the comfort of home. Eleanor would nod, unfolding a creased letter from her apron pocket, reading aloud snippets in a voice steady as riverstone. "The boys here are a fine lot, Ellie. Texans with drawls thick as molasses. Brits with tea in their thermos at dawn. We scramble eggs on camp stoves, the yolks runny and gold. Laughing about the Jerrys like it's all a grand game. But I dream of your biscuits, flaky and warm." Evenings descended with the deliberate ritual of drawing blackout curtains across the windows, their heavy woolen fabric, musty from disuse and storage in cedar chests, blocking out the sliver of twilight to confound any hypothetical enemy bombers that never came to Millville's quiet fields. In the lamplight's soft pool, Eleanor tuned the Philco radio on the sideboard, its mahogany case polished to a sheen by her cloth. Edward R. Murrow's grave, resonant voice crackling through the ether from bombed-out London, painting visceral portraits of the Blitz's aftermath. The wail of ARP sirens slicing the night. The crunch of glass underfoot in rubble-strewn streets. The unyielding spirit of civilians queuing for tinned spam under drizzling skies. Each broadcast twisted her heart with a cocktail of fierce pride in humanity's resilience and a gnawing dread for Will, alone in that same shadowed world. To steady her hands, she knit socks for the troops in the dim glow, the wool from government-issue skeins rough and itchy against her palms, needles clicking like Morse code, dot-dash promises of warmth, for feet blistered in combat boots. Each loop a silent invocation, her mind wandering to the feel of Will's hand enveloping hers on winter walks, calloused yet tender, grounding her against the gale of uncertainty. Sundays offered a fragile respite in the white-steepled Methodist church, where the pews, polished oak worn smooth by generations, held a congregation of waiting women, their faces etched with lines of worry softened by the collective lift of hymns, rising tremulous and pure from throats parched by rationed hope. The sanctuary scented with the delicate, haunting perfume of lily of the valley, arranged in brass vases on the altar, petals nodding like prayers unanswered. Reverend Hargrove's sermons dwelled on endurance, drawing from Corinthians. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things. His voice rolling like the river after rain, offering solace that settled in Eleanor's bones like a balm. Meals through the week were governed by the stern edicts of ration books, their coupons clipped with care. Meatless Tuesdays yielding pots of navy beans simmered slow in molasses over the wood stove, the syrupy sweetness clinging to her tongue like a fleeting indulgence, stretched with cornbread baked in a black iron skillet, its crust golden and crisp. Gasoline shortages chained her to the village, meaning walks everywhere, along graveled roads that crunched under sensible Oxfords, the summer sun raising veils of dust that settled on her skin like a second gritty layer, or winter winds whipping sleet that stung like accusations of abandonment. Will's letters were her true north, arriving in battered airmail envelopes with RAF postmarks, irregular as monsoon rains, but cherished beyond measure, each one unfolding like a map to his heart. They described his world in strokes both vivid and veiled by censorship's black bars, the pervasive, bone-chilling damp of English fog that seeped into the Nissen hut barracks like a living melancholy, soaking wool blankets and turning ink to smudges. The earth-shaking roar of Rolls-Royce Merlin engines in the P-51 Mustangs, vibrating through the tarmac as squadrons lifted off at dawn, dew scattering from grass blades like diamonds fleeing the light, the raw camaraderie of pilots, aces like Bud Anderson with his easy grin, or young lieutenants fresh from stateside fields, huddled around pot-bellied stoves in the dispersal hut, sharing luckies whose acrid smoke curled lazy in the chill air, laced with the bitter tang of tobacco and the undercurrent of fears voiced in jest. "We're the guardians of the heavies now, Ellie, the B-17s lumbering like silver geese toward Berlin's dark heart," he wrote in a missive from April 1944. His script hurried across foolscap, blotched by a patter of rain on the trestle table, the paper crinkling under her fingertips as she read by the kitchen bulb's yellow halo. "Flak up there bursts like malignant black flowers against the stratocumulus, shards whistling closer than a lover's sigh. But I grip the stick and think of you, your eyes, sea green in the lamplight, steadying me more than any instrument. The boys call my bird Sweet Ellie. She's got your smile painted on her nose, a lucky charm against the void." Her replies flowed from the soul, penned at the drop-leaf table after supper, the fountain pen's nibs scratching softly across ruled stationery, ink pooling in moments of pause. Tales of Millville's small triumphs. The neighbor boy Tommy Jenkins, just 18, wounded by shrapnel at Anzio, in the bloody January 1944 landings on Italy's boot. His letters home a brave masquerade of pain, as "just a scratch, Ma." The apple tree in their yard, blooming defiantly after a late April frost that silvered the branches like grief, its petals unfurling soft as a sigh against her cheek when she brushed them in passing. She sealed them with a lick of glue-tasting stamps at the corner drugstore, inhaling the mingled scents of licorice whips in jars, and the waxy counter where Mr. Ellis tallied war stamps, willing her words to bridge the vast, storm-tossed Atlantic and enfold him in an invisible embrace, warding off the night's chill. As the calendar turned to 1944, the air thickened with anticipation. The Allied invasion of Europe, a specter looming like thunderheads on the horizon. D-Day, June 6th, dawned with radios across Millville blaring tense, fragmented bulletins. The vast armada crossing the channel under cover of darkness. Over 156,000 troops storming Normandy's blood-soaked beaches, codenamed Omaha, Utah, Gold, Juno, Sword, waves crashing white-foamed against concrete tetrahedrons and mine sands. Men wading through surf turned red, the air rent by the chatter of MG-42s and the crump of naval barrages. Eleanor paced the kitchen linoleum, its faded floral pattern cool and unyielding under her stockinged feet, her imagination soaring unbidden with Will in the vanguard skies, his Mustang a silver arrow weaving protective cover for the paratroopers of the 82nd and 101st Airborne, her heart clenching with every imagined sputter of an engine or burst of tracer fire, prayers slipping unvoiced from her lips like breaths in the frost. His letters grew scarcer in the build-up. Blacked-out lines like deliberate voids gouged from the narrative, leaving her to fill the silences with fragile what-ifs. Visions of him banking through flak-laced clouds, unscathed, his voice crackling over the radio with that trademark calm. Then, on the sweltering afternoon of July 22nd, the telegram arrived unannounced, delivered by young Eddie from the Western Union office on his battered Schwinn bicycle. Tires whispering over the sun-baked pavement, his face ashen and averted under the bill of his cap as he handed over the yellow envelope with trembling fingers. The knock at the door echoed through the empty cottage like a final judgment, reverberating in her chest. Alone in the kitchen, with the clock's pendulum swinging inexorably, she tore it open, the paper yielding with a rasp, and the words swam before her blurring vision. The Secretary of War deeply regrets to inform you that your husband, First Lieutenant William Hartman, is missing in action over occupied France as of July 17, 1944. Further details to follow. The flimsy sheet crumpled in her fist, its edges biting into her palm like thorns, as the world contracted to a pinpoint. The relentless tick of the mantel clock marking seconds into eternities. The cicadas drone outside a mocking dirge, and within, a chasm opening where certainty had once stood. The heart of Eleanor's story lay not in the telegram's cold finality, but in the interminable, soul-testing stretch of waiting that followed. A profound odyssey through the shadowed valleys of hope, where flickers of possibility danced like will-o'-the-wisps, leading her deeper into terrains of fear, unyielding love, and the quiet regret for moments left half-lived. On that fateful July 17, 1944, a date now etched in the scarred ledgers of the air war over Europe, Will's squadron, the elite 364th Fighter Squadron of the 357 Fighter Group, the Yoxford Yanks, launched from Leiston's pockmarked runways at the pale edge of dawn, the air crisp and laced with the acrid bite of high-octane aviation fuel, mingling with the fresh, dewy dampness of Suffolk grass underfoot. Blades bending like supplicants before the wind. The mission briefing in the ops tent had been terse. Escort B-17 flying fortresses of the 303rd Bomb Group to pulverize rail yards at Chartres, south of Paris, choking the Wehrmacht supply lines in the wake of the Normandy breakout. Will, ever the steady hand, climbed into the cockpit of his P-51 Mustang, serial number 44-14875, christened Sweet Ellie in bold letters with her wedding portrait airbrushed on the cowling. A black and white rendition of her smile, eyes alight with that inner light he cherished, now her talisman against the abyss. The leather seat molded to him like an old confidant, worn smooth from countless patrols. The stick and rudder pedals familiar extensions of his will, while the Merlin engine coughed to life with a throaty bellow, vibrating through his spine as he taxied into position, the prop wash rippling the puddles like fleeting dreams. The formation climbed in echelon, 24 Mustangs knitting tight with the bomber's thunderous V's, crossing the channel, where the waves below shimmered like fractured quicksilver under the climbing sun. The drone of 400 engines a symphony of grim resolve. Banter crackled over the RT. Eyes sharp, boys. Kraut'll be waiting with tea and lead. But over the Norman bocage, the idyll shattered. German 88mm flak from hidden batteries, erupting in lethal black puffs. Shells bursting with whip cracks that peppered the sky, shrapnel hissing like swarms of enraged hornets, pinging off aluminum skins with metallic twangs that set teeth on edge. Wool's voice sliced the static, calm yet edged with the razor's keen of experience. Bandits at 3 o'clock high. FW-190s, 12 of them, diving like wolves. The Luftwaffe's yellow-nosed fighters pounced from the anvil clouds, cannons spitting 20-millimeter rounds that traced glowing scars across the blue, igniting a maelstrom of dogfights, planes corkscrewing in lethal spirals, G-forces slamming pilots into seats like invisible fists, sweat beading under oxygen masks. The cockpit a sauna of fear's metallic tang, mingling with glycol coolant leaks. A vicious burst raked Sweet Ellie's starboard wing, cannon shells punching through the skin with hammer blows. The Merlin, tacking oil smoke that smeared the canopy in viscous black streaks. Visibility narrowing to a tunnel of dread. Alarms wailed, gauges spinning wild, oil pressure plummeting, coolant temp redlining. This is Hartman, taking hits, engines bleeding out. He keyed the mic, tone measured as a surgeon's incision, belying the torrent within, regret crashing like waves for the harvest dance's first touch, their wedding night's whispered vows, the child they'd planned, but time denied. Love for Ellie, fierce as the props bite, fueling one last surge. He nursed the wounded bird southward, away from the melee over the checkered tapestry of hedgerows and Norman orchards, heavy with unripe fruit, the altimeter unwinding like a doomsday clock. Below, in the unassuming hamlet of Les Vents, cradled near Avranches, where Patton's Third Army would soon thunder through, villagers paused mid-task, the baker dusting flour from his apron, children chasing hoops in dusty lanes, scented with baking bread and wild thyme. As the Mustang's faltering sputter crescendoed, a guttural growl against the lazy hum of bees in lavender hedges, the summer breeze tousling laundry on lines, like white flags of innocence. Will spotted the cluster of gray stone houses, roofs of slate glinting, tiny figures scattering like startled sparrows, their cries piercing upward. Bail out. The silk chute would bloom him to earth, perhaps into McKee arms for evasion. But those lives below, farmers bent to plows, mothers at hearths, flashed in his mind's eye, as precious as Eleanor's, demanding sacrifice. Teeth gritted, arms straining against bucking ailerons, he banked hard toward the encircling wood of ancient beeches, their crowns a green vault against the sky. The trees rushed up inexorably, branches clawing like skeletal fingers. Impact was apocalypse, the undercarriage shearing in a screech of tortured metal, wings folding like paper, the fuel tanks erupting in a fireball that ballooned orange and black, scorching the earth, singeing leaves to ash in a whoosh of superheated air that carried the reek of incinerated aluminum and high-octane fury. The ground shuddered, birds fleeing in panicked flocks. No parachutes bloomed to mar the pyre. French resistance maquisards, shadowy figures in berets and rough wool, hearts hammering with the duality of grief and gratitude, raced from hedgerows, the haze thick with the choking pall of burning rubber, cordite, and the sickly sweet char of tragedy. They sifted the wreckage with calloused hands, embers nipping at sleeves, and found Will amid the crumpled fuselage, his form still and serene amid the ruin, flight suits scorched but intact, dog tags glinting dully in the dappled light sifting through smoke-wreathed branches, the faint scent of his leather gloves mingling with the acrid aftermath. Mon Dieu, he turned it from us, breathed Jean Moreau, the village's stooped farmer, whose fields bordered the wood, his voice cracking thick with awe and sorrow as he wiped soot-streaked tears, hands trembling from the near miss. Saw it from my plow, aimed true for the empty ground, spared the roofs, the little ones. Under twilight's merciful veil, as patrols of fell gendarmerie scoured roads with snarling dogs, they interred him in the shadowed churchyard of Saint-Pierre, beneath the spreading arms of a venerable oak whose roots delve deep as memory. The grave a hasty mound, padded smooth with spades, marked by a crude cross whittled from beach, inscribed with L'aviateur in canoe, Héros du ciel, soil damp and yielding like reluctant forgiveness. In Millville, 4,000 miles and a world away, Eleanor knew none of this intimate valor, the telegram's arrival unleashing a quiet cataclysm within. Unraveling of the self, thread by thread, where days dissolved into a vigil of aching limbo, time stretching like taffy pulled to breaking. The paper lay on the table like an accusation, its creases deepening with each refolding, as she moved through the house in a daze, touching Will's razor on the washstand, its handle worn smooth by his grip, the bristles still faintly scented with his lather. She wrote ceaselessly to the War Department in Washington, her letters composed on translucent onion skin at the drop-leaf desk, the fountain pen's gold nib scratching like a hesitant heartbeat across the page, ink flowing in measured pleas, laced with the dignity of desperation. Please, any word, citing, rumor, whisper from the lines. He is my horizon. Responses trickled back on crisp letterhead, clinical as autopsy reports. Investigations ongoing, every avenue pursued. Words that landed in her lap like stones, heavy with evasion, stirring eddies of doubt that pooled in her nights. Neighbors materialized at her door like benevolent specters, bearing Pyrex dishes of comfort. Their knocks soft as footfalls on eggshells, casseroles warm through the gingham cloths, aromas of melted cheddar bubbling over elbow macaroni, caramelized onions sautéed in precious butter rations, or tuna noodle bakes evoking church suppers past. Eat up, dear, strength for the long haul, urged Mrs. Abernathy, her eyes crinkling with shared widowhood from the Great War, yet each forkful tasted of ash on Eleanor's tongue, a betrayal of appetite amid the hollow in her middle. Daily pilgrimages to the post office became sacrament. The quarter-mile trek along Oak Street, a meditation. Pavement scorching through thin soles in August's blaze, when heat mirages danced over tar, or slick with November's first skim of ice, breath clouding like unspoken grief. Her heart would leap at the clerk's sidelong glance, only to plummet into the void of the brass-boxed emptiness, a ritual of hope deferred that carved deeper grooves in her spirit, each empty return a small crucifixion. As the war's machinery ground inexorably onward, the liberation of Paris in August 1944 ignited headlines in the Millville Gazette. Eisenhower's forces sweeping through hedgerows, free French tanks trundling down Champs-Élysées, amid cheering throngs waving tricolors, the air electric with joie de vivre. After 4 years' yoke, whispers of rescued airmen filtered through AP wires. Downed pilots sheltered in haylofts by the Maquis, evading Gestapo with forged papers and forest paths slick with dew, subsisting on crusts of pain au chocolat and berries tart as survival. Eleanor clung to these fragments, like lifelines, imagining Will in such a hideout, his frame leaner from short commons, boots caked in Normandy mud that squelched with each step, eyes scanning the tree line for patrols while he whittled twigs into flutes, humming Shenandoah to pass the endless hours. To fill the yawning hours, she volunteered at the Red Cross canteen on Main Street, a Quonset hut repurposed with gingham curtains, rolling bandages with mechanical precision on long communal tables, the cotton gauze soft and sterile under her fingers, a tactile anchor against the mental tempest, while servicemen on leave, doughboys with fresh buzz cuts and duffel bags, sipped coffee from tin mugs, sharing dog-eared photos of sweethearts that mirrored her own ache. Christmas 1944 descended on Millville like a velvet shroud, snow blanketing the rooftops in pristine folds that muffled the world's clamor, transforming lampposts into sentinels of white. Eleanor strung a single strand of tinsel across the mantel, its shimmer faint in the firelight, and hung the lone ornament from their tree, a delicate glass bird Will had gifted on their first anniversary, its iridescent feathers catching the Yule log's glow like captured fragments of his spirit, wings poised as if to take flight anew. Carols from the Philco evoked Bing Crosby's velvet baritone crooning White Christmas, but the melodies twisted in her throat, evoking dances past rather than joys present. VE Day, May 8, 1945, erupted across the nation in a cacophony of jubilation, firecrackers popping like celebratory gunfire along the riverfront, radios blaring "We'll Meet Again" as strangers embraced in the streets, horns honking from the few gas-allowed Fords. But for Eleanor, ringed by well-wishers at the town square picnic, it rang hollow as a cracked bell, the peanut brittle sweet on her lips, but brittle in her chest. "He's still out there, fighting the shadows," she confided later to her sister Lydia over chamomile tea in the cottage, the porcelain cup's rim cool against her trembling lips, steam veiling her eyes like a merciful fog, the herbal scent a pale echo of summer meadows. Conflicting dispatches arrived in fits, one from the Red Cross suggesting KIA based on a crash report, another from intelligence hinting MIA, possibly a Stalag Luft 3 guest enduring canned cabbage and delousing powder. Each contradiction a fresh lash to her spirit. Yet she refused the grave's finality, preserving his closet relics, the woolen sweater knitted by her own hands, still holding faint traces of his warmth and tobacco, the leather flight jacket with its sheepskin collar soft as a caress. The post-war years unfurled like a slow, meandering river carving new channels through her landscape, each season layering fresh strata of longing atop the old. 1946 brought the prodigal return of POWs from German camps, gaunt liberans stepping off troop trains at Cincinnati's Union Terminal, hollow-cheeked with Stalag rations, eyes haunted by wire and watchtowers, clutching duffels stuffed with Red Cross parcels remnants, chocolate bars melted to waxy slabs, tinned sardines reeking of brine. Eleanor scanned the platforms from afar, heart lurching at every familiar gate, but Will's absence carved deeper, a negative space in the reunion's joy. Seeking solace, she assumed a role at the Millville Free Library, a Carnegie-funded edifice of Indiana limestone on the square, its hushed aisles a sanctuary of musty pages and polished oak shelves, where she dusted tomes on aviation history, the 8th Air Force's appalling ledger of over 26,000 airmen killed or missing, statistics that humanized her private inferno, names like Eaker and Doolittle leaping from print like acquaintances. She corresponded doggedly with veterans' outfits like the 357th Association, sealing missives with red wax that hardened like her unyielding hope, enclosing stamped envelopes for replies that seldom came, each postmark a breadcrumb trail leading nowhere. By 1947, as the world stitched its wounds with the Truman Doctrine's anti-communist bulwarks, and the Marshall Plan's dollars flooding Europe's ruins, tractors rumbling anew in French fields, Berlin's airlift planes droning like mechanical bees, Eleanor's vigil persisted undimmed. Summers rent by thunderstorms where rain drummed the tin roof like insistent, unanswered queries, rivulets tracing window panes like tears too exhausted to fall. She tended her garden with a fierce, almost ritualistic tenderness, knees sinking into muddied mulch, soil crumbling between fingers stained umber, harvesting beefsteak tomatoes whose juice ran viscous and red down her wrists, evoking visceral flashes of bloodied cockpits far away, the salt sting mirroring her inner brine. Friends, sensing the toll, urged gentle release over crumbly coffee cakes at the diner, their words kind as summer rain but firm as oak. 12 years. Ellie, the living need tending to. She'd smile faintly, murmuring assent. But alone in the gloaming, she'd trace his framed portrait on the bureau, the glass cool and unyielding under her palm, his gaze steady as ever, igniting silent dialogues of regret, for the family suppers unshared, the anniversaries marked by solitary toasts to empty chairs, the words of parting left too sparse, too assuming of tomorrows. A subtle, unforeseen twist wove into the narrative in the autumn of 1952, an overlooked filament in the vast bureaucratic tapestry, unearthed not by official channels, but by Eleanor's cousin Harlan, a bespectacled clerk at the county recorder's office, whose genealogical hobby led him to sift War Department microfiche in Columbus. A misfiled Graves Registration Service report surfaced. Will's remains, exhumed from the provisional Levante plot in the spring of 1945 by U.S. teams in olive drab jeeps, identified beyond doubt by dog tags stamped Hartmann, W07890012, his effects inventoried, wallet with her photo creased from pocket wear, Zippo lighter engraved To Ellie, Love Eternal, and reinterred with quiet ceremony in the Normandy American Cemetery at Colleville-sur-Mer, overlooking Omaha Beach's windswept bluffs. Plot C, Row 12, Grave 45, under a white Latin cross amid 9,387 souls. Notification. Swallowed in the deluge of post-war paperwork, D-mob rushes, VJ Day euphoria, a clerk's oversight amid mountains of forms, leaving her adrift in limbo's fog. Eleanor's pulse thrummed like a war drum as she petitioned the Army's Personnel Bureau, her latest letter typed on library onion skin, carbon copies filed like talismans. Confirmation, please. 12 years shadow lifted. In the sweltering heat of 1956, 12 years to the precise hour of his last radio call, resolution arrived in a manila packet from the Quartermaster General, postmarked Washington, its seals unbroken until her kitchen table, hands steady despite the tremor within. Inside, his Bulova watch, crystal cracked like a fractured vow, hands frozen at 2:47 p.m., the moment of descent, its band tarnished but engraved WH2ER. 6:15:40. An undelivered letter, paper brittle as autumn leaves, folded in his breast pocket, ink faded to sepia ghosts. My dearest Ellie, if the engine quits and the fields rise to meet me, know every loop and roll was flown for you. Every breath an echo of our porch swing dreams. The sky's vast, but you're my true north. Forgive its claim. Live fully in the light I loved. Yours beyond the clouds, Will. Accompanying affidavits from Levante, translated by a WWII stenographer. Villagers had tended the crash scar annually since liberation, laying bouquets of wild poppies, crimson as Normandy sands, and lavender whose heady perfume warded ghosts, dubbing him L'aviateur héroïque in hushed toasts at the estaminet, for veering from hearths and cribs in his final seconds. An obscure, poignant detail. In 1947, amid the village's rebuilding, roofs thatched anew, barns raised on Lenley snails, they'd erected a granite plaque at the wood's edge, inscribed in elegant French script, À l'Américain qui protégea nos foyers, Juillet 1944, weathered by salt winds and lichen, but enduring, yet a phonetic misspelling in USA. Records, Hartmann with double N, had orphaned it from linkage, a clerical phantom prolonging her exile in uncertainty, turning years of quiet torment into a testament to fate's wry indifference. Emboldened, Eleanor charted passage to France in the spring of 1957, the SS United States slicing the Atlantic in 5 opulent days. Her stateroom a modest haven of varnished teak and crisp linens. Waves lapping the hull in rhythmic hypnosis that mirrored her inner ebb, hope cresting, grief receding. Cherbourg's docks bustled with GIs rotated homeward, duffels slung, but she pressed onward by rail to Avranches, the countryside unfolding in verdant folds scarred faintly by shell craters, now greened over like healed wounds. In Les Vents, the hamlet welcomed her as kin, Jean Moreau, grayer but eyes bright, clasping her hands with soil-rough palms at the church gate, where bells tolled a somber vesper, their bronze throats vibrating deep in her chest. Over tables laden with farm bounty, bain rustique crusty and warm, civet de lapin stew rich with juniper, local cider crisp as autumn, stories flowed like the river, how the maquisard smuggled his tags through lines sewn in coat hems, a child's drawing of the fiery guardian angel, yellowed but treasured, the plaque's dedication under a harvest moon, villagers toasting with calvados that burned like memory. At the cemetery, perched on cliffs where gulls wheeled eternal vigil, the sea breeze carried salt and the wild thyme of the bluffs, manicured grass yielding soft under her knees as she knelt at grave 45. Fingers tracing the white marble cross's inscription, William Hartman, Ohio, July 17, 1944. Its smoothness evoking the cool plain of his sleeping cheek. Tears salting the earth as closure bloomed bittersweet, a release laced with enduring ache. He hadn't returned to her arms, but his final act of grace rippled outward, a quiet heroism etched in stone and story, binding strangers across seas in shared reverence. The aftermath of Revelation unfolded for Eleanor, like mist lifting languidly from the Scioto, at first light, unveiling the subtle contours of a life reshaped by irrevocable loss, yet subtly enriched by its profound depths. Colors more vivid for the shadows cast. Returning to Millville in June 1957 aboard the same stately liner, the packet of mementos tucked like relics in her valise, watch ticking faintly once wound, letter folded into a Bible's pages, she carried the truth as a gentle, grounding weight, a lodestone orienting her toward horizons once obscured by fog. She chose the solitude of remembrance over the clamor of new unions, her heart's chamber reserved for Will's echo, finding instead a quiet, multifaceted fulfillment in the cottage's rhythms, the library's serene aisles at midday, where sun slanted through leaded panes to gild the spines of histories and novels, musty pages turning under her thumb like confidences shared, evenings with Lydia's brood of nieces and nephews tumbling through the door, their tow-headed energy a poignant laughter-laced. Echo of the family she'd envisioned, cookie dough smeared on cheeks as they helped in the kitchen, flour dusting the air like celebratory snow, their innocent queries. Aunt Ellie, tell us about Uncle Will's flying machine. Drawing stories softened by time, his Mustang a noble steed rather than a winged coffin. As fresh conflicts stirred the embers of global unrest, the Korean War from 1950 to 1953, claiming another generation in frozen Chosin Reservoir, passes. MacArthur's Incheon landings splashed across front pages. Vietnam's Indo-Chinese whispers lengthening into full-throated roars by 1955, with advisors in jungles thick as secrets. Eleanor, extended her hand to other sentinels of waiting, volunteering with the American Legion Auxiliary in the Veterans Hall on River Road, a clapboard building redolent of varnish and pipe smoke. There, amid folding tables stacked with mimeographed forms, she guided Gold Star mothers through the labyrinth of pensions and allotments, her voice steadied by trials thrice hers, yellow documents rustling like dry leaves as she explained clauses with patient clarity. Section 322 covers dependency. Hold here for the allottee's signature. Her own ledger became a quiet ministry, letters penned to widows in neighboring Zanesville, ink flowing with empathy born of the bone. The weight carves deep, but it polishes the heart to a finer shine. Lean on the memory's warmth. In the balmy spring of 1960, as Eisenhower's farewell warnings of the military-industrial complex flickered on black and white TVs, she planted an oak sapling in the cottage yard, its root ball swaddled in burlap, soil mounded tender around the trunk with a trowel that bit the earth like resolve. Sourced from a county nursery, its leaves unfurled emerald that summer, rustling in zephyrs like the pages of an unwritten sequel to their story, branches reaching skyward in silent emulation of his flights, a living memorial that shaded picnics and whispered resilience through gales. Transatlantic bonds from Levante sustained her, annual missives arriving in early May, envelopes with azure stamps depicting the Eiffel Tower, enclosing pressed blooms, poppies vivid as remembered passions, their petals veined like maps of the heart, lavender sprigs tied with twine evoking Provençal summers. Jean Moreau's script, arthritic but warm, recounted the village fete. We raise glasses to Willem, your will, under the oak that mirrors yours, accordion wheezing La Marseillaise into the dusk, children dancing as if to chase away old phantoms. Eleanor's essence evolved into a beacon of understated fortitude, her presence a steadying force in Millville's tapestry. She accepted invitations to speak at the high school's assembly hall, a vaulted space echoing with adolescent scuffle, her tone contemplative as a fireside yarn, illuminating war's intimate human toll, not the sweep of grand strategies or the thunder of panzers, but the hollow reverberation of empty chairs at harvest suppers, the phantom rap of knuckles on doors that swung open to silence, the way a husband's pipe, left on the sill, gathered dust like unanswered prayers. Love, she'd impart to rapt faces, eyes distant, as she evoked Will's deep, resonant laugh that once filled their home like sunlight spilling through blinds, endures beyond the veil of absence. It asks not for perfection, but persistence, weaving gold from grief's raw thread. In the turbulent 1970s, as Watergate's serpentine scandals slithered across evening newsreels, Nixon's tapes hissing like adders, Ford's pardon a bitter pill, she sought solace in quilting bees at the community center, bolts of calico yielding softly to her needle's prick, patterns emerging in intricate mosaics, log cabins for stability, flying geese for flights untaken, each stitch a meditation bridging past and present. Fabrics whispering under calloused tips like lovers' secrets. The oak thrived, its canopy broadening to dapple the yard in mosaic shade, acorns scattering like legacies for squirrels' hordes. Eleanor departed this earth in the tranquil autumn of 1985, at 67, her passing as gentle as leaffall, heart giving out in the garden amid fading asters, soil soft on her knees one last time, laid to rest in Millville Cemetery's sunlit plot, beside an eternally empty grave reserved for Will, his bones honored in Normandy's sacred acres, per her steadfast wish, a headstone reading simply, "Beloved wife of William Hartman," waited with grace. The cottage passed to Lydia's eldest, its walls echoing with new generations' footfalls, the oak sentinel over all. In Levant, the plaque endures at the wood's haunted fringe, burnished yearly by villagers' hands, now including great-grandchildren of those saved. Its inscription a quiet paean to selfless grace. Wildflowers renewed at dawn on July 17th. The bells of St. Pierre tolling across fields where tractors hum hymns to peace. As the night deepens its velvet hold and stars etch their timeless wheeling patterns across the vast dome above, pause to reflect on Eleanor and Will. Their tale but a single poignant strand in history's immense intricate weave, where threads of valor and vulnerability entwine. In the hushed sanctuaries of our own hearts, love teaches us to embrace the ache without flinching, to unearth beauty in the patient art of waiting, turning what is lost into what is eternally found. What unspoken longing, dear listener, stirs within you on this quiet eve, whispering of loves that time's river cannot wash away, urging you toward tomorrows rich with their undimmed light?